Joining me now is Dr. Doug Clement, a man who has been an Olympic athlete, a physician, a sports medical expert, inventor of the Vancouver Sun Run, along with others, and someone who has promoted a healthier lifestyle for a long time. Doug, welcome.
Thank you.
How did your career get started? Did you start as an athlete who became a doctor, or did you have an interest in medicine and say, I can see the benefit of being an athlete?
Well, that's a very vital question, and it's something that I often ask myself.
Yeah.
And if I go back to the high school period of time, I clearly came out of the athletic side of things. I was a good student, but my sort of interest, if you will, sort of the natural sort of expression, was in contact sport, in football and rugby.
Really?
And track and field or running was sort of a secondary thing. But at 5'11" and 168 pounds, I mean, the idea of being a football player was probably not a great idea. And it turned out that I was good enough in track and field to have offers of scholarships in a variety of universities, and I chose the University of Oregon. And that probably was one of the more significant things in terms of leading me to where things have gone over the last 86 years.
Why? What was it about making that decision to go?
Well, it really, many of us, over our life years, find somebody who we see as a mentor.
Yeah.
And that person can play a very important role in a young person's life. And I found that in the track coach at the University of Oregon.
Okay.
Whose name was Bill Bowerman.
Oh, yeah.
And he ended up, of course, being the founder of the Nike Shoe Company.
Never heard of him.
And the story of Nike and its successes had yet to happen at that point. But I started off in my first year university being interested in physical education, now known as kinesiology. And the next year, I think it was in mathematics. And every year I was searching for things, and Bowerman was sort of pushing me, and I didn't understand why at that particular point. But then the next year it was pre-dentistry, and then in my final year, pre-medicine. After the fact, after many years later, it turns out, of course, that Bill Bowerman himself wanted to be a doctor. But World War II intervened, and he went into the ski troops for the U.S. Army, into Italy, and many distinguished careers that way. Wow. And then ended up back teaching high school in Medford, Oregon, and then ultimately teaching at the University of Oregon, both as a football coach and as a track and field coach. And so he really indirectly moved me into the medical sphere. And of course, being an athlete at that point, it became a natural thing to start to look at the body, not just as a conveyor of diseases, but what are the maximums? And that's where the origin of exercise medicine and sports medicine that we were fortunate enough to be part of with Dr. Jack Taunton and Don McKenzie at UBC in 1977. All these things sort of came together, and it happened that the head of family practice was a former rugby player who played at UBC when I did, and the head of kinesiology, Bob Morford, was the same sort of situation, one of those collisions, if you will, of opportunity. Much as we're talking about we're facing now at UBC again with the idea of wellness. But anyway, that laid the groundwork of me getting into medicine, and then strangely getting involved in coaching, which I had no particular intent to. But my wife being an Olympic athlete and I, we started practice in Richmond in 1960, and within a few months, the head of recreation, who had an office in a broom closet in the old Richmond City Hall in those days, said, look, if you start a track club, we'll build you a track. And so immediately we got going on that, and we had our 50th anniversary of the KJAX Track and Field Club in 2011, and we had 55 Olympians that were connected to our club in
55 Olympians that you played a role in their career.
We had a great
At
number of coaches,
yeah.
and so I wouldn't claim to have coached all of them.
No, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
you touched on their careers
Absolutely.
at some point.
Our organization did that, and that sort of allowed, if you will, me in those early days in the early '60s. God, these athletes are. One thing I did was, after 2 or 3 years, I said, I'm only going to take new patients who are athletes.
And so that started to narrow down your scope of practice into sports medicine.
And then I started to run across all these issues that I didn't ever have any exposure to, nor was there any journal or book or anything to do with these things. And we're dealing with things that now are commonplace and recognizing things like stress fractures.
Right.
Which those days nobody even understood because the only tool we had was an X-ray. We didn't have the MRI or we didn't have the CT scan.
So had you already competed in the Olympics yourself at that point? Okay.
Oh, yes.
And for anybody who doesn't know you, what was your specialty? How'd you do? What year did you compete? Where? And same with your wife because she was an Olympian as well.
That was. I was in the 1952 Olympics I guess I got chosen as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old. And so it was sort of not expected, but I mean, it just happened.
What events were you in?
The 400 meters. I was a team guy. I was on the 4x400 meter or 4x440 yards in the Empire Games. And so I was never a big superstar as an individual, but I was a journeyman guy on a team of 4 people that were running one lap 4 times, and I can remember we finished 4th in the Olympic Games in 1952.
What city?
In Helsinki.
Okay.
The first year that the Soviet Union participated in the Olympic Games, and it was the second year after World War II. Yeah. Second Olympics. And I can remember thinking, oh my God, 4th place, that's just terrible.
Are you kidding? That's remarkable.
Well, it wasn't because I went to, 12th and Oak. Right where the Diamond Center is, at the VGH. And that school was called King Edward High School. Yeah. There's a fence still there.
Yes.
That was from King Edward High School. But King Edward High School had been there from many, many years till it burned down in a fire. And anyway, in the hallways, they had pictures of former students. Percy Williams. Duncan McNaughton, both gold medalists in 1928 and the 1 and the 2, and the gold medalist in the high jump in Los Angeles in 1932. And so I thought, 4th place, that's just brutal. Because I went to a school where everybody won the gold medal. But be that as it may, I do not claim to be some major international athlete, but I was able to participate at a world level.
Okay, and Diane, what did she compete?
She was in the 100 and 200, which, interestingly enough, were the maximum distances allowed by women at that time.
Then same games, 52?
56.
56.
She's 3 years younger than I am, and so she didn't get going in the 52 games, but we were together. As a matter of fact, we met in Melbourne. She was from New Brunswick and myself from Vancouver. A
love story made in Australian Olympics.
Exactly.
Like Roger Federer and his wife. But let's come back to your career now. So you have competed. You've got credentials that are, I'm not just a doctor, I'm an Olympian as well. How did that help you in being able to establish your career as a sports medicine specialist?
Well, I guess the other part of it was the unpaid volunteer component of 40 years of coaching at the international level and the domestic developmental level as well. That was a pretty unique combination of being an Olympic athlete, a physician, and an international coach. So all those things sort of blended into the academic component of the research and the teaching and all those things that occurred at UBC from 1977 to 2000. So when I retired. So it's been a magic experience for my wife and I. When you really look back, it's just sort of a dream world. We have an amazing family, and things could not be better.
One of those people that you interacted along the way, of course, with was Harry Jerome.
Correct.
And you have been instrumental in the creation of a track meet in his name.
Yes. Now, Harry, of course, was He was 4 years, 8 years. I can remember the first time I met Harry Jerome.
Yeah.
Was at Black and Lee. And if you've been around Vancouver, you remember that everybody used to rent their tuxedos for whatever those things in your younger years. And he was getting his graduation from North Vancouver High School, and I was graduating from UBC. So I guess there would have been.
Yeah, you're a little bit older than him.
8 years.
Yeah.
And so the very first event that we put on, other part of our lives has been the Achilles International Track and Field Society, which is a group of volunteers who have done an amazing job of continuing Harry Jerome's legacy, in both an indoor and an outdoor competition now since 38 years. But Harry was in our very first meet, which was in 1964 at Empire Stadium. And the interesting story around that, we got a group of former track and field people together in a room and said we had no money, we had no sponsors, no nothing. And so I was able to convince them that if we went to the bank and we all signed a joint and several note, we could put on an international track meet.
International, yeah.
And so September 19th, 1964, we put on our first event. It was called the International Olympic Preview, and Harry won the 100 meters in that event on his way to Tokyo for the Olympic Games.
Wow.
And so that event, if you will, was broadcast live by Wild World of Sport across the whole U.S. system. We had the Canadian and the American and the German Olympic teams on their way to Tokyo going there.
So this was a good warm-up event for them.
It was a great timing, great location. The only problem was that as we sat there around our kitchen table trying to figure this out, we should get rain insurance because it could rain September 19th, 1964. And the meet hotel was the Hotel Georgia.
Yeah.
And my wife and I were staying there because we were way out in Richmond. And it started to rain.
Oh, no.
And so we had chosen between 9 and 10 o'clock on the day of the meet, which was a Saturday. And so Lloyd's of London took a beaker, put it out in the center of Empire Stadium, and the bet was had to rain 1 inch in 1 hour. And we won. And so we still drew 9,000 people, and we still got the insurance.
Wow.
And so that started off this volunteer group, which is now, what is that? It's 56 years, I think, or something like that.
Isn't that amazing?
Where we were able then to put on a series of international meets right up until this coming year, which is going to be on May 1st of this year at Swangard Stadium. So that's another component of our lives altogether, but at the same time blends into exercise, blends into medicine, blends into all these things.
Well, it also blends into something else. I had my son in here just before you talking, having a conversation that matters about why it's important to give back.
Yes.
So you were doing all this work without direct remuneration.
Absolutely.
But you were contributing in a way that goes way beyond that. What's the value to you when you look back at your career and saying, it was really, really, and it continues to be important that I am giving back?
Well, it's a strange situation, but it's been my experience that we have received tenfold backwards.
Yeah, but that wasn't the reason for doing it.
No, that wasn't ever the reason for doing it. But in reality, that's what happens. As you give everything away, it all comes back.
Right.
And you cannot buy that.
How important, because you talk about your mentor, your coach.
Yes.
Who went on to do extraordinary things for some running shoe company that I can't remember the name of. Got a slash.
Yeah.
What's it called again?
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, of course, but how important is it that in the course of one's career you remain open to that kind of guidance and remain curious?
Well, that's a good question. I think, there are several false gods in the world. And probably money is one of them.
Yes.
That isn't to say that money is always going to produce unfavorable results. But if that is the only reason, then that can be tricky because often, the commercial world, is taking. But you see some amazing examples to the contrary. I mean, if you take the Gates family as a good example, where they can't count the millions and billions, but they're giving it away.
Yeah.
And it's you see many very successful entrepreneurs who really get as much enjoyment out of doing good than just making money. And
Andrew Carnegie would be an example.
Yeah.
The public library system is largely an extension of his development of all of these library
exactly.
systems. Yeah.
It played a complete role in mapping the future, if you will. As I think the Gates Foundation is doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, life is a great institution, and I just look forward to everything every day.
Well, I don't think anybody can look at your career and go, I want to be you, because you had a unique set of circumstances that put you in the place that you are in life. But what they can do is they can look at your example and say, remain open to possibilities, and anything can happen.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing or giving us a glimpse into your career path.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.